Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the StackVision 7.2 in a Nutshell webinar. I'm Taylor Hempel, and I'm a marketing specialist here at ESC Spectrum. Today, Senior QA Michelle Staniff will share with you the new features and enhancements in the StackVision 7.2 data acquisition system. Just a reminder to hold any questions you have until the end and type them in the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. After the presentation is over, I will read out the questions to Michelle, and she will answer them to the best of her ability. With that being said, let's begin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Staniff, and I'm going to be going over the new features and bug fixes in StackVision 7.2, which was released last Tuesday. Here are our installation requirements. And here's our support timeline for both the server and client. Note that we will end support for Windows Server 2016 and SQL 2016 at the end of this year. And a big thank you to all our beta testers. If you don't have a test server and would like to participate in beta testing, we can set up a screen share with you. Let's start with the new features. Calibration status. This is a new feature which will allow users to start and abort calibrations from a StackVision client, as well as view real-time calibration data. The key features are number one, the control pane. This includes the calibration drop-down list for selecting a calibration to run, as well as the start and abort calibration buttons. Number two is the status pane. This identifies the running calibration and related phases. The currently running phase is highlighted. Number three is the now running pane, which includes the following: a measurement gauge for each channel being calibrated. Each gauge displays the current measured value and the expected value. A red border indicates an out of control limit. Blue border indicates maintenance limit. The timeline near the bottom identifies the overall progress of the calibration by displaying the elapsed time and the remaining time of the running sequence and phase. Blue in the timeline indicates the sequence progress, and green indicates the phase response. Number four is the affected channels pane, and this displays a list of the affected channels for the running calibration. Access to calibration status is set in user accounts roles. If calibration status is not checked, the user will not see calibration status under tools. If calibration status is checked, but control calibrations is not, the user will only be able to view calibrations. The start and abort buttons will be disabled. And here's an example of a running calibration. The control and status panes on the left side can be closed to allow more room for the parameters in the center pane. The gray color for the knots ppm indicates a passing state. Blue for SO2 high indicates drift. And red for SO2 low means out of control. And on the bottom left is the active alarms flyout, so you can view any calibration alarms coming in. Currently, the pass-fail calibration status and real-time errors are not supported. Cylinder management. Enable warning alarms and set limit to 30. In previous versions of StackVision, the alarm was disabled and the warning days blank when creating a new cylinder, which meant that users would have to go back to edit these two fields. In 7.2, the alarm is enabled and the warning days are set to 30 when a new cylinder is created. This applies to cylinders created with the Cylinder Management Editor, QR code, spreadsheet, and XML EDR. Dashboards. Change graph max min on an object. This change was made to give users the ability to change the max and min without having to log into Stack Studio. Graph changes can be made on analog and vertical gauges, and these changes made in dashboards do not update the database. Initial graph max and min settings are from the Stack Studio parameter-based settings. Decimal places and negative numbers are allowed. The max value must always be greater than the min value. The character limit is 9 digits to the right of the decimal and 9 digits to the left. And multi-select edit is not supported. Data Lab. Add a confirmation prompt to save with Process Now. The purpose of this is to add an extra step to the Save with Process Now action to help avoid accidental clicks of Save with Process Now, which would initiate an unwanted Process Now sequence. Here's a screenshot of the new confirmation prompt. StackVision installation. Installation package with MD5 checksum. The new checksum provides increased security to allow for double checking the StackVision executable file. The checksum file is in the same directory as the StackVision executable. The checksum verification procedure is accessible on the StackVision Downloads website. If the published checksum matches the checksum string value of the file, the executable is considered safe to run. Miscellaneous tests. Sort tests by most recent at the top. Previously, the tests sorted by source, system, and component. Now the most recent tests appear at the top. Another miscellaneous test change, duplicate the tab in the QA and certification directory. Miscellaneous tests are currently located in Tools, Part 75, Certification Information. Now they are also located in Tools, QA and Certification, Miscellaneous Tests. The functionality is the same. OPC Data Mapper, add additional logging. The purpose of this is to add meaningful log messages when users attempt to create OPC mappings via the StackVision OPC Data Mapper application. A success or fail message is logged along with more detailed information for troubleshooting purposes. The log file and log config file are both located in StackVision, Application, Server, OPC. Here are examples of a valid mapping and an invalid mapping, and the log messages that are returned for each one. OPC, add a connection method to the log file on OPC Data Manager Service Connect. This change is to provide clarity on the method used by the OPC Data Manager to connect to OPC servers. Possible connection methods include no security, user authentication, certificate exchange, and both user and certificate authentication. The log file is located in StackVision, Application, Server, OPC Logs. Here are examples of log messages. The first one is no security. The second one is user authentication, but no certificate exchange. Third is certificate exchange, but anonymous. And the last one is both user and certificate authentication. OPC, separate the log file for backpolling. By separating the existing standard polling log files from backpolling, it will be easier to sort through logged OPC events. All existing logging behavior and logging levels are unchanged. The new log file is enabled by default and will be generated in the same location as existing logs. The new file is called Data Manager Server Backpoll Log. OPC, add server URL to the log when there is an OPC Data Manager Service communication failure. This covers the specific case where a communication failure occurs, but the session is still active, so you're not in a fully disconnected state yet. Here's an example log message. Let's move to the bugs now. When using our average valid op hours, which is set in Stack Studio System Resources, HR rolling average didn't look back far enough to find all the data. So if you had valid operating hours more than 4 years before the process now start date, and those hours should have been used in the average because there weren't enough operating hours since the cert date, it wouldn't find them. But now HR rolling average looks back to the certification date. Process now fails on start shut. Previously, process now failed on the start shut task due to data duplication in the database. Now the process now start shut task passes without error. Performance summary report generation error. In previous releases, the performance summary report generated an error when a recent code description was more than 50 characters. Now the performance summary report generates. Data management shows failed in the data management history report because the RS key management file could not be found. In 7.2, data management will no longer show failed in the report, and the data management log will display a message. The ratio calculated separately for multiple stacks indicator field is blank in the EDR, which results in an ECMPS error. The only way to fix the indicator is to manually edit the EDR. Now the indicator is set to 1 for multiple stacks. Data controller backup tries to use logger name instead of address. Previously, when attempting to run a backup on a data controller that had a different logger name than the COM port, an error would occur displaying the logger name instead of the COM port. Now the error message will display the communication port instead of the logger name. Day rolling average when using a limit parameter and invalid data. When a 30-day interval with time-weighted, use hourly data for validation, and limit parameter was configured on the server channel, process now day rolling average task would lock the last valid value of the limit parameter until the end of the process now end date, which could potentially cause an erroneous exceedance or a missed exceedance. In 7.2, the day rolling average task now properly applies the limit parameter value regardless if the data is valid or invalid. It also correctly marks the 30-day server channel's data invalid and in exceedance when applicable. I-type sequence type calibrations, interference checks, not displaying in calibrations tree. Interference check calibrations were being filtered out of dashboard's calibrations pick list. Note here that DP-INTO1 is missing from the bottom image. This has been fixed in 7.2, and I-type calibrations are now displaying. QA test status report using wrong row counts for CGA tests. Here we see that the CGA tests were done in the second quarter of 2022, but the operating quarter since is showing 0 instead of 1, since another CGA test is due for the current quarter, which is the third quarter. Now the QA test status report counts the operating quarter since with hours greater than 0 instead of using time online greater than 168 hours. StackVision exceptions log fills with errors. If there are enough minutes in the current building hour to create a valid 1-hour value, but not enough operating minutes to be included in the rolling average, the log file fills with errors. This has been fixed and the exceptions no longer appear. The multi-interval average data report's default date is yesterday's date. The average data multi-interval report defaults to yesterday's date, while the average data report defaults to today. This means that if a linked report is based on both reports, the results are inconsistent. The multi-interval average data report now defaults to today's date, which is consistent with the average value report. Dashboards. Setting a target value throws an exception in the log. The problem was that setting a target value after a target parameter was previously set threw an exception and the number gauge would stop polling. This has been fixed in 7.2 and the number gauge continues to poll. Exceedance events duration report shows incorrect end time for a 1-day interval. The end times were reported as 59 minutes, 59 seconds instead of 23 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds as seen in this screenshot. This caused the duration of a 1-day exceedance to be reported as 1 hour instead of 24 hours. Now the end time reports 23 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds, and the duration shows 1 day. High CPU usage with OPC Data Mapper. While idling, the OPC Data Mapper application would be at high CPU usage. Now the OPC Data Mapper CPU usage will drop down to 0% while idling. Alberta EDR not reporting comments. When the reason code is set to 13, the null analyzer data code is set to OTH. When this happens, the first 70 characters of the comment field should display in the qualifier 5 field, but the field is blank. This has been fixed, and now when the reason code is set to 13 and the null analyzer data code is set to OTH, comments display. OPC Data Mapper enable to map certain tags. The filtering logic, which prevents users from mapping tags with certain properties, was put in place to prevent mapping bad tags to StackVision parameters. To get around this, users had to import files to manually add the tags. Now the two node ID checks, object types, and reference types have been removed. Min to cal ignores injection level. Previously, min to cal would ignore the injection level of a phase when the phase type was switched for the high and low injections. This would cause incorrect calibration results. Now min to cal associates injection levels with the correct phase type settings. Okay, those are the new features and bug fixes. Please notify support if you see any issues with StackVision 7.2. Are there any questions?
I will give everyone a few minutes to go ahead and put your questions in the panel below. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll give everyone just a few more seconds. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now, Michelle. So do you have anything else you would like to add?
No, I don't. If you think of any questions, though, feel free to send them to support, and I will get an answer and get back to you.
All right, here we go. We have one. Are the JSON files available for export in the StackVision 7.0 and above?
The JSON file support is going to be a beta feature in 7.3, which will be our June release. And that's going to be based on whatever has been published by the EPA for the new JSON schema. And if there are any schema changes after 7.3, we're going to put them in the 7.4 release, which will be in September.
Let's see. Any more questions? Will we need to eventually update to the 7.4 to access JSON files?
Yes.
All right, it looks like we don't have any more questions. With that being said, thank you everyone for taking time and coming to our webinar. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.